It's often argued that all stylized art derives from realism, and what better resource than the Asaro head? The original, and similar models inspired by it, are all great tools for learning the human head. But if you're an anime artist, how often have you struggled to translate this into this? Looking at both, it's obvious that realistic heads and anime heads are three-dimensionally different. Improving at one requires specific knowledge that may not even apply to the other. So in today's video, we'll be studying both of these heads, looking at both proportions and planes to figure out how to get good at drawing both. As always, we'll have a step-by-step demo at the end for you to follow along. Here are some tutorials and resources that I referenced heavily in the making of this video. Link down below. Part 1. Proportions. Despite the premise, don't assume that either style is useless or completely divorced from the other. While it is a struggle to draw cute anime girls and boys with realistic techniques, you could always just make them hot. Anime as an art style, though heavily codified these days, does vary. Older or more serious characters are often drawn in proportions where Asaro-esque heads become more useful, while features common in modern moe-style anime characters can also inform Western styles looking for a bit more of that signature, cute or youthful appeal. Either way, if your goal is to draw one or the other, rest assured that any effort you make learning is unlikely to be wasted. Let's start. When drawing the head, most artists will start with the cranium and the center line, for good reason, as almost all of our measurements can be traced back to these two simple marks. Note that the cranium is longer from the side, somewhere around 1.5 times the length, but nothing specific as it can vary with people or artistic preference. Halfway down the cranium, we can find the line where the brows sit. Distances above and below this line mark the hairline and the nose. Common advice places them equally apart from the brows, but feel free to adjust. Another equal distance below the nose rests the chin, conveniently dividing the face below the hairline into roughly equal thirds. Real skulls have flattened sides that are actually angled when viewed from the top, adding some space from the sides all the way to the brows. Most anime heads aren't too strict with the brow placement, but knowing is more helpful than not. So far, the basics have applied to both heads. Now, things might start to differ. On the realistic model, the tips, the upper base of the ear, and the earlobes roughly align with the brows, the eyes, which we will cover in a bit, and the nose, respectively. From the side, the ears can be found halfway back from the cranium, marking the origin point of the jawline. On the anime model, the tops of the ears don't quite reach the brows, instead aligning with the tops of the eyes. This makes the cranium feel visually larger and the face much cuter. Otherwise, the side profile is the same. Though, as with all of these tips, mixing and matching ideas for simplicity or aesthetics is always an option. Alright, let's keep going. The lower lip is found between the nose and the chin, placing the mouth just slightly above. Anime models have a tendency for thinner lips, which can sometimes place the mouth closer to the middle. The mouth itself helps us find the level where the jaw starts to taper into the chin. On the realistic model, this is roughly true for the front and the sides. Pay close attention to the space under the mandible connecting to the neck. Most beginners forget this submandibular area, but it adds a lot to the silhouette of the head, especially from the side. But a lot of anime heads soften this transition heavily from the jawline down. This obscures the actual jawline from the front and the side, giving more emphasis on the cheeks for the silhouette. Now for the eyes. Common advice says halfway down the head, but eye height does affect the overall impression of the face. Placing eyes lower shortens the face for a younger look and vice versa for higher ones. From the front, the eyes are placed halfway across each half of the head, commonly one eye's length apart. Anime heads tend to lean towards wider set eyes, almost touching the sides of the head in some references. Alright, from the side, the head starts looking a lot more complicated, but don't worry though. Both heads share a simple proportion formula based on markers that we actually already know. Take what would be the center line of the face from the side and measure equal distances behind and beyond the front of the face. The front line marks the tip of the nose, while the back line marks the front of the eyes, the back of the nostrils, and the very tip of the chin. If your character has a pronounced chin, it might extend somewhere between the back and the center lines. On the anime model, the top lip aligns with the center line, while the bottom lip falls further back. The nose extends further forward, and there's overall more depth to the front of the face compared to the realistic model. While anime heads have that cat snout look to them, realistic lower faces tend to be flatter in comparison. The positioning of upper and lower lips can vary too. While the reference might line up nicely with the guides, that doesn't really mean that your characters have to as well. Alright, we're almost done. From the front, the realistic nose barely extends past the inner corners of the eyes, something that I didn't actually expect the anime nose to follow as well. And those are the proportions that I like to use. I find them helpful, but do remember that they were taken from very few specific references and aren't meant to limit your designs. People and characters can vary a lot, so treat these tips more like guidelines than actual rules. Alright, part 2. Planes. Tell me if this sounds familiar. When I started learning anime art, I could never quite get what I thought were the planes of the head to fit into what I was drawing, so I ended up just sort of guessing how and where to place the details. And when I tried to shade, I had to look up and rely on other people's art because I didn't quite know enough to make my own decisions. Not to mention the time spent looking for the right angle and the right lighting. If you're having the same problems, don't worry, I think this happens for a good reason. You see, most artists start learning the head from realistic sources, like the Loomis method. Massively important for grounding your work, don't get me wrong, but beginners expecting what they learn to make intuitive sense when trying for more stylized art might get confused, like I did. It's true that most styles derive from real anatomy, but there are some specifics in modern stylized art that can contradict the anatomy that beginners tend to learn, even at the level of three-dimensional form. For example, realistic sources might tell you to trace the edge of the cheekbone and connect it to the side of the mouth or the chin, forming your realistic cheek plane. But in the anime models that I've studied, they tend to divide the cheeks into distinct front and side planes that taper all the way down to the chin, like those head wraps that some people wear after they get their teeth pulled out. Realistic models have steep cheek planes and distinctly front-facing planes for the mouth and the chin, while two simple planes can reasonably describe the lower face of an anime character. Think like a face mask or a shield for the shape. The area between the eyes is also deformed, stretched vertically to match the height of the eyes. This makes the nose angle off from the face at a much lower point than you would think. Speaking of the nose, it's clear that the details are heavily simplified. In practice, usually just the shadow describes a simple pyramid-like shape, often with just a line or a dot to show the tip of the nose. In contrast, here's a simplified guide to the construction of the nose that I like to use. I've split the details into 3 different parts. Feel free to pause. Note that our eyes are slightly angled when viewed from the top. Try touching the inner and outer corners of your own eyes. The outside corners should be a bit behind the inner ones. Probably. This is why in quarter view, the far eye looks thinner than the closer one. It's facing away from the viewer. When drawing eyes, just remember the positioning of the corners and imagine angling them out a bit. The most apparent difference is in the form of the eyes. Normal eyes are spheres. It seems intuitive to imagine anime eyes to be spheres, but depending on the style, they're usually not. If I were to describe the form, it's like having a pair of glasses implanted straight into your face. Most models have concave irises though, and the lashes range from flat cutouts to complex strands or full-on clumps of hair. The ears are more of an anatomy problem, as they're mostly similar for both heads. Here's a guide I pretty much cobbled from the internet with all the different parts highlighted. Try studying the ears yourself if you feel like learning more. Alright, part 3. Time for the demo. There are a few popular ways to start a head in perspective. There's the box for accurate placement, there's the curved mask for finding the details of the face in different angles, and there's the classic sphere with the centerline technique if you just want to start on the anatomy. Or you could be lazy like me and, well, use 3D. For transparency, I started these next sketches and some of the previous ones by tracing the roughs over CSP's 3D models. While it definitely can become a crutch if overused, while making this video, I actually found that it sort of gave me the muscle memory to draw this new system of forms myself even faster and without the usual struggle of guessing the right placements. As an aside, I'm going to trust that you know the difference between tracing for learning or chasing deadlines and, well, plagiarism. If you put your effort towards getting better, then you'll probably get better. Just, try not to be dishonest on your way there. Okay, let's start with the anime head. I used the 3D model to get a rough angle on the tilt of the box. I'm using the cross-section of the box as the cross-section of the face, so I also added that front measurement tilted in perspective to help gauge the distance of the nose and the chin for later. Lowering the opacity of the model, I started on the sketch bit by bit, starting with a cranium. I ended up with this shape to describe the anime jaw and chin. The top curves are the edges of the upward-facing planes of the cheeks. Sort of looks like an upside-down tombstone or like a shogi piece. Next up is the nose. I drew the outline as I imagined seeing it from underneath. For details this specific, I think it's better to look for reference if you need it. After adding the brows, I basically refer to the model for the position of the ears. These can get tricky in different angles, so besides reference, using the lines on your drawing itself can help find the right placement. Because of the slight tilt, I drew the closer eye a bit wider than the farther one. I also redrew the center line with the forms of the mouth to help my imagination for the sketch later. After adding a bust, I started on the clean sketch. I roughly painted in the eyes because it's more convenient for me than line art. I do have a video out on drawing stylized eyes if you want to learn more. My hair drawing is still a bit unstructured and messy, so I might have to study that for a future tutorial. For now, I'm basically making curved triangles and just doing my best to give them a sense of form. Before coloring, I tweaked the eyes and changed the color to match a warmer palette. I also filled in the silhouette for clipping masks. I like to add gradients with a big soft brush, so clipping masks help keep the layers on top from spilling over. Filling in the shadows, I roughly picked the average color of the hair and moved it down halfway towards black, experimenting with a more saturated, more vibrant shadow this time. Shading in the skin, I felt that halfway was a bit too harsh, so I opted for a color that's a bit softer. Okay, big point. Notice that the neck shadow starts below those submandibular planes. This seems to be a common thing in modern anime shading, especially for low angles. I think it's to minimize definition with the shadows to keep that clean, cute look. Now I'm adding in some simple highlight shapes and giving the skin a bit more redness around the ears, the nose, and where the shoulders would be. Finally, I lowered the clean sketch and gave it a bit of a glow with a low opacity overlay layer and a pink soft brush. The inner details of the face, like the mouth and the nose, needed some lines, so I kept the opacity there. And that's the anime head down. Now let's try mixing in a bit of realism. The mask is a bit better suited for weirder angles, but even straight on it helps us map out the features. I'm not too concerned with following the model too much because I'm using the measurements that we've covered earlier. I sketched it out with a bit of a mixed style. The features, especially the eyes, are recognizably kind of anime, but the head is made with the realistic proportions in mind. With a bit of effort, here's the clean sketch. I'm basically fully using the 3D, the undersketch, and my own knowledge until I get a drawing that I like enough to move forward with. Again, I'm adding subtle gradients in the skin and the hair. I do tend to put the darker color below or away from the light for a soft lighting feel. Next, I rendered out the eyes. Notice the shift in color when the highlight crosses into the iris. Just tried that out for the demo. I think it does add a nice effect. Still using the same process for skin shadows, but with very light hair shadows this time. I couldn't quite get it to look nice with a darker color, maybe because the hair color is naturally light, I'm not sure. Something to figure out some other time. I chose to add a soft blush to the nose instead of hard shadows, keeping in line with that flat, clean idea. Instead, I used the highlight to suggest the form of the nose. After lowering the lines, I gave the hair some highlights, and we're finally done. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. It goes to show how good structure with simple shading can go a long way. Do check out the resources and the tutorials from the artists that I referenced, and check out my last video on drawing eyes. It's a lot easier to follow than this one. Anyway, thanks for watching, hope to see you again soon, and have a great day.